So why do you think, in your opinion, so many athletes struggle to stay consistent with their training even when they're motivated?
I think things like motivation, effort, discipline are very much emotionally driven, which is okay because that's going to go up and down. I think then the problem becomes a lack of clarity. So I think if things are clear, then I think understanding then the steps and the processes and the habits that make all that up become easier to stay kind of on the straight and narrow, on the right path with. So I think most athletes are very vague when it comes to things like goals. So things like, I want to get better, obviously is probably one of the most vague goals you can have. Even things like get drafted, still pretty vague because I think you need to become clear on, well, what does getting drafted look like? What does that mean from where does your footy, can you actually define where your footy needs to be at your draft year? What level does it need to be at? Where does your speed need to be? Your fitness, your strength, your forward craft, like all that stuff. Where does it need to be? How many games you need to be playing? Sessions you need to be doing? Then you start to be able to paint a really clear picture around, well, this is the process. Then it doesn't matter as much as if I'm motivated or tired or not motivated. Then I think it's a lot simpler to stay on the right track. So I think you need to get really clear on what success is and what that actually looks like for you and that goal you've got. Break it into the smaller parts, and then from there revisiting that weekly. So off the back of that, you actually have to write it down. It's not just something you say, and every time I ask you, it's maybe slightly different, worded a little bit differently. Yeah. It's actually written down on a piece of paper. It's somewhere where you can actually revisit it daily, weekly, because the quote, a goal well defined is half achieved. So if you can so that might be, well, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, if you can do that, you're halfway there, because that's what most athletes can't do. So if you can do that, you're already 50% of the way to get there, and then the other 50% is actually just doing the work.
Yeah, and if I'm sort of to reflect on my own kind of journey, I think every young kid who plays footy has a dream of making the AFL, and so that was my dream. And
you still dream about it.
Yeah.
I'm 38, but still dream about it.
So that's my overarching goal, I would say, or as a kid. And then, step under that is I've got to sort of make married with strangers is the most common sort of pathway to get to that point.
Yep.
To get to that point, I need to improve my speed so I can make the married with strangers.
Yep.
So that's how I kind of laid it in terms of the clarity that you mentioned.
Yep.
And then from there, you sort of start to have a bit of a plan on what training looks like. You start to become more disciplined with training, with nutrition, sleep, all that other stuff that comes with it. And then now I think I've got to a point where I wouldn't even call it discipline. I think I just do it out of habit. Like I was even mentioning this morning, it's cold, like you're tired, 6 a.m. wake up and you're running.
6 a.m. start.
Or 6 a.m. start. So
yeah.
Probably for me, I 5:45 wake up. And once the alarm goes off, you're like, oh, the last thing I want to do is go to the gym. But just because my body is nearly just so wired to do it, I just kind of get up and do it.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say I'm motivated. I didn't get up this morning looking like, oh, I can't wait to go to gym. I just did it.
And I think that would be everyone. I was going to say 99%. It's probably 100% of people. I don't know if everyone, every session will always say, I want to do this, but they know it's part of the plan. I've got a certain goal and what I want to achieve, and this is a part of that because you're clear on this is where you want to get with where your footy, this is what you want your body to be like, this is the injuries and stuff you don't want to happen. You understand all that, so therefore it's really clear as to this is the path. It's a non-negotiable. Yeah, and I reckon if I told you to have the morning off, we'd have an argument because you'd be like, I'm not having it off.
Yeah,
it'd be that point.
It would then go to the point of where I'd go and off and do something.
Yeah. Well, you'd be saying to me,
worse.
why do I have to have it off? What's that going to help me with? And I'd be like, if I couldn't justify it, you wouldn't believe it because it's outside your plan. As opposed to kids being, like, they're having this conversation in their own head all the time and finding a way to rationale why they don't need to do it. As opposed to, that conversation doesn't even happen if you understand, if you're clear on, it is part of the process to get me where I need to go.
Yeah. And so you kind of touched on it there in terms of it's great to have a goal, but how do we update? How do we review our goal? Because what happens if, we get to the 6 month mark and we sort of check in and we're either achieved the goal or we haven't. What are the kind of next steps?
Well, I think the first step with the clarity stuff, just quickly there, is so then it's hard if you don't have a uni degree and you spent years working in the sport, or I get that it's hard for people to do that. So the first step is reach out to someone that you trust, that you think knows what it takes to get me where I am. And it's, parents might get offended with it. It's probably not your parents. Unless you've had 3 brothers that all got drafted, they're probably not the person that can give you the advice. So it's probably someone in your sporting pathway or someone that's worked with athletes that have got them there before. So then you can start to identify what needs to happen. So then you've got your goal. So I think individually it's one big goal, so that's like 5-10 year goal. So that's further away and that's big. Dream as big as you can. Number 1 draft pick. Like, don't just say drafted. That is, I want to be the best. So then it goes, okay, what's the next layer underneath it? So where do I need to be kind of 12 months? So then you start to look at what's my 12-month goal? And then you can start to break that down into, okay, well, for that to be true, which is a great way to frame it for me, what needs to be true for that to occur? So then you can go, okay, what do I need to do every day? So then if I stack that every day, it is 100% reasonable for me to believe that my 12-month goal happens.
So I know that you are pretty strict with your own sort of goal setting and your sort of 5 daily non-negotiables.
Yep.
So are you able to and happy to share that with, I guess, your own experience?
Yep. A big shift for me was in and around, my motivation would go up and down, and I was very much like a lot of athletes in that I had a routine that kept me accountable enough because I had to show up to work, I had to do certain things, and my programs all had to be done. But in terms of my own personal growth to go to the next level, I have a business mentor, and he's very big on the daily non-negotiables. And so one of my main ones is I get up at 4:30 every day for a few reasons. One, if it's every day, I don't fall out of that routine. So now as a result, even on weekends, my bedtime and my wake time are the same. So it's not, Mondays aren't hard for me because I do it Saturday and Sunday. I'm not falling out of routine and then have to get back on track. It's just the same. Christmas Day, 4:30. Like, it's just happens. It's non-negotiable. Every day, it's the same. So there's a couple of things that helps with as well. It means what I do the night before and that day, everything is still prepped on the same bedtime. So all the bad behaviours like staying up late or like alcohol. I don't drink. Haven't had a drink in the 8-9 months, and even then I wasn't a big drinker, but because it means it affects my sleep, which then means when I'm up at 4:30 has this spiral effect. So what I've seen is just the simple goal of having a simple habit of 4:30 a.m. has meant that as a result it's actually transferred into a lot of other things in my life, and now what's I've found is 4:30 is actually a great time for me to be really productive. My young fella's still asleep. I actually find I wake up and I'm pretty alert when I get up. So there's an hour there before the gym sessions start on Monday to Friday, and then on weekends there's an extra hour or two before the rest of the house gets up, where I actually get most of my so much work done, and a lot of my creative work and stuff that's really important to us as a business. And I don't think that's a coincidence that I've seen the business grow the same time as probably my habits have improved. And so I see the results for me. From an athlete standpoint, I wish I knew this stuff. I had someone reinforcing not just you need to do this, but then the how. And I think that's the point there, is this is the how. This is get your habits right day to day, and you'll see yourself improve dramatically.
And I think we've had athletes that have come through the gym who have had that big dream, that big goal, which is great, but then they've sort of, I guess, attached themselves to that goal, and all they do is focus on the outcome and not the actual, I guess, the process and the journey to get there, and the sort of daily habits that, and like the way you framed it, what needs to be true for me to get there.
Yep.
They probably lack that. So what should athletes sort of actually focus on?
I think focus on the outcome leads to disaster for a few things, because one, if we're real, a lot of athletes don't actually achieve that outcome. So by hyper focusing on that, you're just setting yourself up to fail in the sense that you're probably not going to be happy. I think the secret sauce is actually having a goal, yes, and a big goal is great. Drilling down on what it takes to get there. So one, that actually increases your likelihood anyway that you get there. But that's where actually the transformation happens. And this is why I see big changes in the kids we work with, is the person you become off the back of the daily habits and the work you put in to become better, just in all areas, whatever that means for you and your goal. will create a transformation that will hold you in good stead for the rest of your life. So focusing on the outcome, like I said, is just stressful. Focusing on the habits gives you something to drill down on and actually action, which means you don't focus on too far ahead. What am I doing right then and there? What now? As well as the fact that it'll create a result that in 100 days, just do that consistently, just over 3 months, you won't recognise yourself. Whereas most people can't focus for 30 days, let alone 100 days, let alone 3 years, 1,000 days. So just bring it back to what do I need to do right now and then in that moment, that day, stack those days, 100 days in a row, and I promise you'll be blown away by the results.
And to go off on a bit of a tangent, even just like obviously the percentages of everyone achieving their dream are so small. So obviously that comes with, I guess, what you can call failure in some sense. Like I didn't achieve my goal. Yes, I've accomplished a lot of other things, but I haven't accomplished that overarching goal. So how do people then like actually reset? Because I know typically we're seeing athletes who it's their draft year, they don't get picked up, then they kind of just fade away because they don't really, they lack a bit of purpose. They lack what the next goal is.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts around that stuff?
As you ask that, I think of you. People sometimes ask me, and I think they get surprised at the answer. If I said what's my biggest success to date, and we won't go into too much details because you don't have to share all your background. Your goal was to play AFL footy. Yep. And I won't even ask you your goal now. But the reason why that hasn't happened, you're my biggest success in terms of where you're at right now because of where you came from to where you are now, like the gap. At 21, own your own home. Your family now lives with, you help provide for them. How many 21-year-olds can say they're in that position off the back, especially where you came from? Like Darcy's a good example we use for a lot of stuff. He was probably going to play AFL footy with my help or not. I would argue that we helped him probably be a bit more prepared, and my strengths as what I believe from an athlete development tied into what he needed to work on more. Already a great runner, great footy player, all that sort of stuff. He was probably going to get there. So did I really change his trajectory? Maybe his outcomes at times now, but he was going to get there and get opportunities. Whereas were you going to be where you are now without the work you put in to chase a dream you didn't achieve, but the transformation that came off the back? We're sitting here because I tried to hire you before. Tried to pinch him. Because the skills you learnt, the work ethic, all those intangibles now make you a great person to employ. And to one day, we're talking about consultancy stuff and run businesses and do all that sort of stuff and I think this is why people hire athletes. Not because the brand, I think people get caught up in that. Like LeBron James's brand. LeBron James spends over $1 million on his body a year because of his habits. And that's what gets his success. And I think people are drawn to him, obviously the aura, but I think that comes from he just stacks all this work. Like the Kobe stories are legendary, like Michael Jordan, his work ethic and how hard he trained and what he did is it the end result people attract to? But maybe. But I think people appreciate the steps. They're just not willing to kind of acknowledge that and do it themselves.
Yeah, and that's where I think, and I continue to say that me not making bushies the first go around was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because of the things that I had to do to change that outcome and the habits that I learnt. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think people are surprised because I think people think, athletes, this sort of stuff. But this is bigger than that in the sense that just, if we're talking transformation, it's a bit of a, throw around word again, like how do you define that? It's just stack the work, have faith, yes, have something to work towards, but just trust that if you're working hard, you are shaping yourself for the future, for whatever happens. And you just got to trust that.
Yeah.